For those who may be unfamiliar with Resilient Lehigh Valley, we are a collective impact effort to increase youth and family resiliency by promoting trauma-informed and culturally responsive practices and systems. Please visit our website at resilientlehighvalley.org for resources on trauma, resiliency, social emotional learning, self-care, and mindfulness. You can also request trainings on trauma and trauma-informed care on the site as well. Before we introduce our coaches for this session, some housekeeping. Please keep your audio muted and video off. We hope for a vibrant conversation and ask you to share comments and questions in the chat. If you prefer to remain anonymous, you can change your username at this time. In the upper right corner of your video, click the 3 dots and choose rename. Coaches will be monitoring the chat and bring your thoughts into the conversation. If you would like to comment on something anonymously, private chat the coaches and they will follow up with you. We are recording the session so that more educators can access this resource. Recordings will be available on the Resilient Lehigh Valley's website and on United Way, the Greater Lehigh Valley's YouTube channel. If there are any members of the press in this session, please immediately identify yourselves and publicly in the chat. Everyone in the session is asked to protect and respect the privacy and comments of all of our participants today. Without further ado, we are delighted to be partnering with Pinebrook Family Answers in this effort and are fortunate to have Shelley Feller, Leslie Tenbrook, and Vicki Conte sharing their wisdom and expertise in unpacking some of the challenging behavior our teachers are facing. Thank you, Shelley, Leslie, and Vicki. Please take it from here.
Welcoming you all, and also just asking you to give yourselves a moment to appreciate all you've accomplished and been able to manage during these very unprecedented times as we're working out in child care centers with administrators and with teachers. There have always been great challenges and opportunities in the classrooms, and those have been increased tenfold with the pandemic, Black Lives Matter, and an election year. So there have been so many additional challenges and traumas for everyone to work with, that just getting through each day right now successfully and being able to help students is a big, big accomplishment. And I wanted to just take a moment to thank you all for the hard work that you've been doing on behalf of the children and families in the Lehigh Valley. It was great to see the questions that came in thus far, but I would say for myself and the rest of the unconditional childcare team who was also able to provide input into the questions, there really weren't a lot of surprises for us based on what we know of children and their development and what's going on in our communities currently. So we look forward to addressing some of those questions and concerns with you during this time. We know that it won't be complete, but that we are always here for you after our conversations today, and that you can reach out to Unconditional Childcare at any time via email or phone call to problem solve and provide strategies for any challenges that you're having or that come up after our meeting today. Leslie and Vicki, did you want to take a moment and say anything?
I guess it's maybe a little bit redundant and echoing a lot of what you said, but I know a lot of us are trying to work and help people in the community. Also, maybe in some of our cases too, dealing with kids that are home, or trying to navigate these schools or the hybrid schools or whatever's going on with childcare. So yeah, we do come with those perspectives as well. So we hopefully can incorporate that into some of the information that we have for you. And I just wanted to encourage you, please just throw stuff up in the chat or the private questions. We're not going to throw anybody's name under the bus, but if it's your question, it's probably someone else's question as well.
And I would just mirror that sentiment that we're all, we are all truly in this together. We all are experiencing issues right now in our own lives and the people that we work with. And so you and your students are, in that way, you're not unique. And hopefully, we can give you some of the trauma informed knowledge that we have, and give you some suggestions and support really for what you have going on. Shelley, do you want to start and take it away?
Yes, so I'm going to share the first question that came in, and I'm reading it off my phone, so forgive me, but refusing to do work or go on Zooms, speaking very inappropriately to teachers, screaming, poor Zoom etiquette, not having tablets charged, doing homework or playing games during Zoom calls, shutting off screens during Zoom, chatting during Zoom, not completing assignments or handing in empty assignments, and lying about work that needs to be done. So one of the things I think we're noticing in unconditional childcare is that for the first time, one big challenge in centers is that they're dealing with multiple school districts, as opposed to the primary school district that the children are usually engaged in. Many of the comments posted in that particular question are school related, and where we're finding the best results are when the center is reaching out to the school district to talk specifically about one child and what it is that that child is experiencing or struggling with primarily. And then coming up together with a strategy for that child and including the parent in the solution. So making the parent aware of what's going on, reaching out to the school district, talking to them about what it is they're seeing at the child care center, and then together working on strategies that can help that child to be successful. Along with that, we're finding that visual schedules for each child are very important. That's something that we can do and that we have been doing for a lot of children through unconditional childcare, is making a picture schedule for them at their station so that they know what's coming next and what to expect. Helps them in that process. But we also find that, this is very overwhelming for children and very stressful. There's a lot of feelings and emotions going on within them, and they don't have the expressive language capacity to really talk about how they're feeling, or maybe there hasn't been time allowed for them to discuss how they're feeling. It hasn't been part of their day to discuss their feelings and emotions. And so because of that, they are physically communicating in other ways, such as turning off their Zoom, not charging their tablet. If it's difficult for me and I don't charge my tablet, I don't have to turn it on and I don't have to be ready to go, and I can prolong some of the stress and anxiety that I'm feeling. So I think that along with the communication with the school district and with the parent, we as teachers and administrators need to be able to take a look at where that child is coming from and what part of the day is this happening and where the struggle might be. And then address some of those basic needs. Do they have a picture schedule? Do they know what's coming before and after? Do they have movement breaks in their day? And then if all of those pieces are being met, then taking a look at what else might be going on. Is this an area of difficulty for them in terms of the part of the day? Is this happening at the same time every day? Is it the same type of information that's being submitted every day? Or is it something else maybe that's going on in their home or personal life that might be contributing? Does someone at home have COVID? Have they recently lost a loved one in the family, or a family pet? We really need to be looking at all of those pieces in order to ensure that we have a successful plan. Leslie, do you want to add anything?
Yeah, so a lot of my background is in mental health, and I think it's important to remember too that in times that are these stressful times and stressful things that are happening, and we can talk a lot about what those various stressful things are in the home, but this is also going to maybe trigger or exacerbate any mental health problems as well. And when I think about that, I also think about what are the families going through and what's going on at home, because as you guys all know perfectly well, sometimes those kids are the beacon. We used to call it, remember the flashing red light at Kmart, the Kmart special light, like something is going on in my home that is not okay right now. And that could be any number of things. So I think it's really important to remember that a lot of the acting out behavior that we see is really just sort of a flashing light to say, something's not right here, whether it's not right with me, not right in my home. But I think that's an important thing to look at too when we are looking at that behavior and trying to figure it out. So I know you guys do that a lot. We do that a lot in terms of looking at this behavior and trying to figure out what's going on, what's the reason for it, what's behind it, what does it mean? And I don't know, we can talk a little bit about, Vicki, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about the trauma and the trauma triggering aspect of this as well.
Right. And so that's where I would come in with the piece of trauma, being trauma informed. And part of being trauma informed is recognizing that likely these children do have something beyond what's happening right now with COVID they've already had this thing happening in their lives, these events that have already happened. Recognizing that maybe, you come to the table as people who may have things in your own background that you may bring to the table as well. So your perception of what's happening, could be a part of that too. And I think just being really supportive is going to be the first step in dealing with any of these children and communicating if you can with their families. I do recognize myself that in many of your cases, your frustration comes because of the child's frustrating behavior, but also you don't have any backup with parental help. So just taking that moment to recognize that that's the main primary issue that you have with the child, and then going from there and and then we can talk about solutions and steps from there on how to address each child individually. But recognizing that everybody is coming to the table with frustration right now. I hear it, all the time. I have friends who are teachers and professors. Believe me, it happens on the college level too. Across the board, it's a very frustrating time for all students. So I think communicating with smaller, younger people is even more difficult because they don't have those strong communication skills to begin with. So we have to recognize that and see if we can find alternate ways, like Shelley mentioned about, creating a visual plan for a child in that position is going to be really helpful because they can't communicate verbally the way that you can communicate verbally. So maybe finding an alternate method of explaining expectations and the help that you can and the support that you can provide for them would be really helpful.
Folks, before we continue on, I know some people have joined late. So what we want to let people know is that we have some questions that we are addressing that came in with the registrations, but we're really hoping that people throw some chats or questions into the chat. If it's a difficult question, you can send it privately to me or one of the other facilitators, and we'll just take a look at it and we'll share it without any personal information as well. But we're really hoping that we do get some off-the-cuff questions. So, but otherwise, we're going to continue with some of the questions that we got when we did the registrations. And I think the next one, Shelley, did you want to add anything else, or should we move on to the next question?
No, we can move on.
So I think the next question talked about kids getting angry very, very easily. And that looks like so many different things. It can look like acting out. It can look like withdrawal. It can look like avoidance. If someone's trying to do something on the computer, on Zoom, and the kid crawls under the table and won't, participate in that. I know that's a lot of things that teachers are struggling with as well. But when it comes to anger and temper tantrums, and Vicki, maybe I'll kick this to you because I know you and I have talked about this, but a lot of times it has to do with their frustration level and not having the skills that they need to be able to, first of all, acknowledge that is frustration, and then to really communicate to someone, I need help, or this is too much for me, or I can't handle that. Vicki, anything you want to chime in with that?
And that's what I would say. And most times when you perceive something to be anger, it is really just misdirected frustration. And they're not actually angry about anything. Well, I mean, they are inside because they're so frustrated that they can't verbalize what they need to, or they don't even know. That's another piece of trauma is people do things, they don't even know why they do them because it's so ingrained inside them. So just having that, being able to recognize that is really helpful. I think sometimes giving children simple tasks that engage them in what you're doing sometimes relieves some of that frustration because they don't know how to participate without getting frustrated. So maybe there's something simple that you can do or assign them to do that will help them to participate in a healthier way. That's I think what I would add to that. I don't know about Shelley.
Yeah, I agree with everything you've both said. And I think a couple of things will help with that anger. Certainly consistency and routine is helpful. Structure, helping them know what to expect, offering choice whenever possible. Those are things that will definitely help them more effectively manage their day. When you think maybe about your own response in the last several months and your own level of frustration, sadness, fear, and how that all contributes to your ability to control your anger. And then you think about a child who is, from 1 to 9 years of age with not the same level of coping skills or tools in their toolkit in terms of self-care. And we wonder why they go to anger. And I wonder why they're not in anger more, because this has been such a difficult time for everyone, particularly for the younger people, I think, because we don't always take the time to ask them, how are they feeling, to talk about social, emotional development. And I think for those of you who are involved with NACCE, you've been seeing more and more of that information coming through emails and focus groups. But it's really an area of opportunity that we need to be focused in now more than ever. And recognizing the loss factor that has occurred for all of us during this pandemic is also occurring for these young children, and that they are also experiencing grief in terms of things not being the way they typically have been for them, and all of the adjustments that they've had to make. And for some of them, that may mean relocation of housing because they've lost a home and they've had to move in with other family members. It could mean the loss of seeing their friends in person. So we need to also take into account this loss factor and this grief that they're experiencing and allow space and time for that opportunity for them to be able to express that, whether that's in having conversation with you during a snack time, whether that's in drawing pictures so that they can be able to communicate in a visual way. We need to provide space for them to be able to share how they are feeling and give them a chance to ask questions and have you as their trusted adult answer them in an age appropriate way. I also think it's important if you can end the day with a positive and talk about, what went well for you today? What was a success for you today? What are you grateful for today? Helping them to recognize that there are positives and bright spots in every day. And they might be struggling academically, but maybe not across the board. So where are they doing well? Where are they doing well at the child care center? And helping them to reflect on those positives. And then maybe also offering an opportunity for them to talk about what they want to work on tomorrow. and that tomorrow's another day, and that there's a chance to grow and try again and start again tomorrow. So those would be some suggestions I would have around feelings and emotions. We also offer and suggest a lot the use of a feelings chart or a feelings wheel, depending on the age of the children, to help them point to pictures of how they're feeling, to help you have a better understanding. And oftentimes that's done in the morning when they're coming in, to give you an indication of maybe how their day is starting. And then you can refer back to it later in the day with them. Also, an opportunity to do some breathing starting in the day, in the beginning of the day, maybe right before lunch, later in the afternoon, even just for a minute or two to help them lower their frustration level. And those types of things are going to help not only with the classroom management, but also for their ability to attend and focus to the classwork that they have to do if they're in the school age setting.
And I would add to that,
Yeah.
that is something that I, in going into the schools and doing trauma trainings, I think I've told every, or suggested to every school that I've gone into, if you start your day with, and I know everybody's pressed for time, everybody has so much to fit in, but if you start your day with, a few minutes of really easy meditation that you can do with children, like Shelley suggested, like a breathing exercise or something of that nature, that will gain you so much more time later, because everyone will then be focused in the same place when they come in, and then everyone's on the same level playing field when they start the day. I do, because one of the next questions is unwillingness to participate in classroom activities when asked, doing whatever they would like, even though they're a task to do. And understanding that being in the classroom is one thing, being virtual and having to remain focused for a young child is even more difficult. So, taking that minute it's okay to take breaks. It's okay to structure things around maybe taking a break with your class and saying, okay, we're going to do this. And, and it could be something as simple as, okay, everybody stand up and do 5 jumping jacks. You're redirecting what's happening so that everyone, again, is bringing everybody, I like to say, bring everybody back to center, like you're in yoga. When you do that, then you're erasing what just happened, and then you're beginning again with a calm, level playing field. Get that out of your system and let's start again. Just doing whatever they want, even though there are tasks to do. Sometimes children in this setting need very clear instruction on specific tasks. So saying, those visual guides like Shelley was speaking about, it would be really, really helpful for some of the children if you had a visual guide on what your daily structure is going to look like, so that they can refer back to it. Okay, this is what's next. This is what's going to happen today. I think that's very helpful.
I'd like to take it back a little bit to the trauma kind of thing, where we talk a lot in trauma training about the fight or flight reaction. And you guys have probably heard of that before. And a lot of it has to do with when you perceive something as a threat in some kind of way, we respond physiologically to fight or flight. We respond physiologically by like running away or avoiding it, or by fighting it or becoming aggressive. So when we're talking about both things, we're talking about temper tantrums, but we're also talking about avoidance behavior. People that, kids that won't get on computers or do the things that they're supposed to do. Something we need to keep in mind is, are they in some level in that kind of fight or flight response? Because in any case, but especially with kids that have experienced trauma or some really difficult life circumstances, anything can trigger that. Now we say, you have fight or flight in the face of a threat, but a threat might be a scary adult asking me to do something I don't want to do. And all of a sudden they get triggered. They have that physiological response where their body has a flood of adrenaline, and all of a sudden they are rolling on the floor, yelling and screaming in a temper tantrum. And a lot of times they're flooded at that point and they aren't able to respond. So sort of going back to that out of control behavior, we need to be very, very aware how to manage that. And I know you guys do that fairly regularly, but it's really important that we maintain our own level of calm, whatever behavior we're dealing with. So the more escalated that we get in any kind of situation, the child is going to mirror that. What we're hoping that they do as we help them calm down is that we remain calm and they mirror us and they follow along with us. So that's really important, and it's much more important for somebody who has experienced trauma in their lives. However, right now, with everything that we're dealing with, it's as if we're all experiencing trauma all the time, with the political stuff that's going on, but just the level of stress that we're all experiencing. And as parents, that's our kids are experiencing that either vicariously or at the same time that we are. So these kids, when they go home, we don't know really what they're dealing with. Is it a chaotic home environment? Are mom and dad just losing it because they don't, they can't put food on the table? So this really is almost like a low-level collective trauma for all of us. So I think we're seeing much more fight or flight reactions than we might on what was a typical day. So we can talk a little bit more about that as well.
Yeah, I agree with you, Leslie, and that's something we've talked about in unconditional childcare since the second week of the stay-at-home order. And we developed an early childhood trauma training specifically for early child care providers and teachers. And we also developed a self-care training for teachers, specifically to help teachers with their own self-care during this very unique time. And we've facilitated those both virtually and in person at a number of centers since June, and had very favorable and positive feedback. But one of the pieces in that training that kind of speaks to what you were talking about, Leslie, is the idea of fight or flight. And in the training we provide, it's just a 2-minute video on learning brain versus survival brain. And where we talk about trauma-informed and trauma-informed care, I know many of you know your families and know details about what's going on in a lot of the families in your centers, but not everywhere and not every child. So coming at this in your classrooms from a trauma-informed standpoint, and kind of going with the idea that everyone, and in this case everyone, has experienced some type of trauma, and reacting in your classroom with that in mind by lowering expectations, by doing some breathing and meditation, and by allowing some time for discussion around emotions and fear and grief. Just in doing those things, along with a picture schedule, I think if you did just those things, you would definitely see vast improvement in your classrooms.
Yeah, I think self-care is paramount here, for you all, and again, for your students. And what you learn through your own self-care is something that you can bring into the classroom for sure. Self-care is going to make all the difference in the world.
It absolutely is. And being in that survival brain without breaking that down, and helping the children to be able to go into that learning brain, it's going to be very difficult for them to focus and attend to anything going on the computer screen and to try and do any type of learning. You've got to be able to quiet that brain from a survival brain to a learning brain.
Sometimes a person just needs to be able to be heard. Just telling their story is sometimes, from a trauma point of view, just being able to tell your story because you've been holding it inside and you haven't been able to get it out anywhere. There's nobody at home. And remember, in a lot of cases, you spend more time in a day with these children than they spend at home with their families. And so you're the first point of contact for them, and letting them know that just letting them know that you're there, and that if they need to tell you something, that they need to talk about something, is also really helpful for the child.
When we intervene in problematic behaviors or crises, one of the first things that we teach people to do is to validate the feelings that are prompting that behavior. So if you have a kid that's screaming at you, instead of responding, impulsively, the ideal thing to respond is, wow, you seem like you're really mad now. And the kid might scream, yes, I'm mad. She stole my pencil. And you could say, wow, I would be really mad too if somebody stole my pencil. So you're not confirming that it actually happened like that, but you're validating that, yes, they're angry. You're helping them understand what they're feeling. Because again, if they're in that mode, language isn't working real well in their head. So you're putting some structure to it. You're saying, I see you're feeling very angry right now. And then what you're saying is, it's okay that you're angry. And not all kids get that message at home. Like a lot of kids, if they're acting out angrily, that's a punishable offense. That's something you're not supposed to do. So we really have to try and differentiate the emotions from the behavior. And I think that's something you guys probably do often is, yes, it's okay to be angry, but it's not okay to hit. Well, we're going to see more of that now, and the kids are going to need more of that. So before I kick it off, I just want to remind people, please do questions in the chat. We're really excited. We're hoping we can get some. So please do that. Where are we, guys? Shelley, where are we on the list here?
I wanted to add one more point, and as soon as you talked about the chat, it left my mind. So I'm sure it'll come back to me. So let's, I guess, move on to the next statement. Oh, I know what I wanted to say.
Okay.
I just did want to say, along with all of those thoughts, I think it's important for everyone to keep hearing this too shall pass, and to let the children know that, yes, things are different right now, and everything seems like it, and it's true that it isn't the way it was, but things are going to get back to normal. It is going to be okay. People are working on solutions and strategies. And even though we've said, well, this too shall pass, I think it's important for them to hear it regularly and be reminded that this will have an endpoint and things are going to get better. And we need to be able to continue to share that message with them, and let them know that they're not going to be learning like this permanently. So I wanted to just add that before we move to the next question.
I think I might use this opportunity to segue to there was a sort of a question or a problem of actually ultimately is grief, where they've lost, some students have lost loved ones and people that they've known to the virus. I think talking about grief might be a good thing. Any kind of grief or loss equals trauma. So just, we don't see it as that the children not being able to play with their friends or not being able to go to school to see their friends, only seeing them online, but not actually being physically able to be with them, is a form of loss and ultimately of grief. And so identifying that and going from there is going to be really helpful too, because telling them that, yes, I understand how awful this is right now, but there is hope, is sort of, that's where I was sort of jumping off of Shelley there with that. I don't know how you feel about that, Leslie.
Yeah, I think that might be something we really should talk about too, because I think this is kind of unprecedented. We're losing people who are not, most kids lose people in their lives. They're old people, they're grandparents. That's how it's supposed to work. But they may have lost younger people in their lives, or more people than one would typically expect. And I think that a grief can come in so many different ways and so many different behaviors. And the child might be acting out and not understand that it's related to the fact that he can't see his grandpa anymore. And I always like to parents might not always educate the kids about really what's going on and why is grandma sick and we can't see her and she's in the hospital. I'm not sure that kids really know what's going on. And that's a difficult line to draw too, because we can't tell them stuff the family doesn't want to tell them. But it's not just the death of people, and we have had deaths, but it's also that I can't see grandma. I can't go to grandma's for Christmas. My uncle's in the hospital and I can't visit him. I can't, maybe I can talk on the phone, but maybe I can be on Zoom, but they're losing people. And it's really important to remember that loss is a trauma, and they're going to experience that.
I've had to move centers because where my parents work now is not near where the center I used to attend, or the center I used to attend doesn't have the hours because of COVID that my parents need for work. And so I need to go to a different center. So I don't see my same friends. I'm not going to the same location. All of that is part of grief and loss, and is significant in, for all of us, it would be, but particularly for children, where that is what is consistent to them. That is what they know. And we need to be able to let them know that that's going to be okay.
Before we move on, guys, there's a question that says, what is the best way we can work with families when a child's behavior is difficult and frequently occurs in the day? And that's a good segue, because I know one of the next questions includes part about parents not doing what they're supposed to. Parents maybe not reading the messages from the center, or not, calling in when the child's off for that day. So let's talk maybe a little bit about, and Shelley, I'll kick this to you, maybe a little bit about how do we best work with families when the families aren't doing what we need them to do as well.
Right. Well, so for pretty much all childcare centers, you all have a handbook that you give out to families, and that reviews all of the necessary basic information. But what to do right now during the pandemic, when things are so different, and are challenges that are not covered in our handbook of expectations. And one of the things I talked to the resource coordinators about earlier today, and what we're seeing is a disconnect between the center, the home, and the school. And I think this speaks to a couple of the questions that were noted previously on the entry form, and really making sure that you are in conversation with everyone. So if you see a problem with a child who is not completing the work, that your conversation is not only to let the parent know, but also a good idea to reach out and let the school know. Along with that, if you're having a behavioral difficulty in the classroom, and it is such that it is disrupting the classroom, or it's problematic to the child in terms of their work or completion of responsibilities, the time to have that conversation is not at pickup or drop off or through a note home. It is to set up a meeting, and that right now might be virtual because of the increase in COVID cases, via Teams or Zoom rather than in person. But it needs to be at a time where the parent knows that you want to talk to them about something that is important, and you need to do it face to face, or it could be a phone call. But it needs to be a time that is set aside, that everybody knows the purpose for the call, and it needs to be happening sooner rather than later. So sometimes we might tend to let this go on for 2 or 3 weeks. Right now, I would say if this happens 2 or 3 days, by the 3rd day, I'd be setting up a meeting with the parent to discuss what the problems are and what's not happening. And again, this is a difficult time for all of us. So not in a blaming way or an accusatory way, but to say to them, I see this is happening. I'm concerned. I want Aisha to do well and be successful. It's a hard time for all of us. Is there anything going on that would be helpful for me to know? Is there a way that we can put together a plan? Here's what we're doing at the center. Is it possible that you could do this at home? And come together with an idea and strategy to see if it will be helpful for her or him. And then work on that for a week or 2, and then have that follow-up conversation. But looping the school in is helpful too, because you don't know what they might be able to do to help support as well. And if they are not aware of the challenge, they cannot provide part of the solution. And then I think it's important to have realistic expectations. One of the biggest challenges I think right now is the expectations of what students are actually able to accomplish and what is reasonable and realistic during a time of such trauma in their lives that they've not experienced before. And so some of that may be advocating to the school about what's realistic and whether or not this child might need an extra gross motor break or the ability to not eat lunch in front of the camera so that they can have a few minutes to go to a quiet corner or to do a gross motor activity or to have some breathing with the rest of their class. And so advocating for them based on what you see and what you know as a professional to say, hey, I think this child needs this, and this is what I'm suggesting, and to be able to collaborate in that way.
I think that's really helpful. We work a lot with parents and lots of different kinds of parents with lots of different skills and abilities. And, you know, I don't want to be redundant, but just understanding that we're all under the same level of stress right now. But a lot of the skills that you work with kids in terms of their socioeconomic, not socioeconomic, sorry, social emotional learning is ways that you'll want to talk with the parents as well. So if you have a parent that's, you know, she's frustrated and she's yelling at you about what you're trying to share with her, I would think of that in the same kind of fight or flight supportive way that you would talk to a kid that was having a tantrum. It says, it sounds, you know, Mrs. Smith, like you're really angry right now. Can you tell me a little bit about what's going on, and let her share what's going on? So I think it's so frustrating right now to try and maintain life and parent these children at the same time. And I think parents may easily get more defensive than they have in the past because, you know, they're maybe just holding it all together right now. And their child's behavior problem is just one more thing they have to cope with, and they're not coping so well right now. So I think, you know, when you're the most frazzled, probably is the best time to make that phone call. So if there is a quiet or calmer moment where you can say, hey, Mrs. Smith, I really want to talk to you about this pattern of behavior that your child's experiencing. We're seeing this a lot. Are you seeing this at home? But then also asking the parent, you know, what do you think's going on? And the parent may not make their connection in their head that they've been talking about Uncle Joe who's in the ICU, and maybe they don't think the kid's paying attention, and the child is, and the child doesn't understand what's going on, and there's a lot of stress around that. So I think a lot of times as parents, we don't always realize that our kids are not just paying attention to what we think they're not, but they're also absorbing our stress. So if I'm upset about Uncle Joe's health and the child's watching me, and I'm giving them the message that things aren't okay because maybe they're not, we forget that that's equally stressful for the kid. And especially if it's a quiet child who tends more towards avoidance or withdrawal, they're dealing with all that stress internally, and maybe we don't see it until it spills out all over everything. So maybe it's a question of they don't want to upset mom anymore, so they're holding it together, and then they get to the center and they fall apart in front of you because they just couldn't hold on to it anymore. So I think it's really important to talk, and I think you probably do this typically, is what's happening at the center, what's happening at home, where are the similarities, where are the differences. But keep in mind too that take a deep breath when you want to talk to this parent, because maybe they are very overwhelmed.
And using that question of, when we talk about trauma, we've changed the question of saying, you know, what's wrong with you? And, you know, and in thinking about the child, don't think, you know, what's wrong with this child, but putting it in the perspective of what has happened to you, and what has happened to the child, and saying to the child, even, has something happened? You know,
Or what's happening.
Or what's happening to cause this? Absolutely.
I think that's a really good point, is that one of the shifts that we make, and I'm just sort of reiterating, is, you know, we used to see this kid acting out or this family that's really falling apart, and we say, what's wrong with this family? Oh my gosh. But we don't say that anymore. We say, what has happened? Because people don't fall apart because they want to, they fall apart because they're maxed out for what they can cope with. So I think that's important. Should we, let's talk about one of the next questions. We talked about parents not doing maybe the stuff they're supposed to.
Oh, Leslie, I'm sorry. Can I just go back to piggyback off what you just said?
Sure, sorry.
No, that's okay. I just want to add that along with that, and along with asking what's happened, and when you're talking to your families, to just make sure or to reach out and find out what resources are available in the community. We are so fortunate in the Lehigh Valley to have some of the best resources and opportunities for collective impact, and so many wonderful organizations working together and available for our families and for childcare providers and early childhood educators. Pinebrook Family Answers has a number of programs. The United Way also, and the Resilient Lehigh Valley website is a wonderful resource for all of you. There's an early childhood section there. If you haven't had an opportunity to go there, you really would benefit, I think, to take some time and take a look at the resources that are provided there that you and your staff may find very helpful. So I just wanted to reiterate, we also have our resource guides available that can be mailed to you. To just also be aware of the resources that are available. Similar to today, you're not in this alone. We're all here for you. There are other programs and agencies there for you and for your families, and to just be able to educate your staff about where they can look for help and support. Thanks, Leslie.
Yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No.
The one question, someone submitted the question about kids' physical reactions to some of the stressors that they're experiencing or some of the challenges they're experiencing. And I'm not sure if that person meant physical in terms of, aggressive reactions or, throwing things or that kind of thing, or if they were talking about physical reactions in terms of aches and pains and illnesses and stomach aches. And I know right now, at least for my own children, the minute somebody coughs, I'm having a panic attack. But I wanted to also make sure that everybody's aware that stress really can and often does manifest itself physically. So if you have the kid that's missing a lot of days because of illness or complaining about stomach aches or headaches or just body aches, it's really, really useful to keep in mind that a lot of that stress and a lot of trauma too, if there's historical trauma, is manifested physically. It's extremely common. And typically what happens is, a child has a lot of aches and pains or medical issues, they're going to physical doctors and people are looking at a physical cause for some of those things. We're not always looking at stress and trauma and mental health component of that. And we miss a lot when we don't look into those things as well. Even if the child has an established medical problem, it might be something that stress can exacerbate as well. So I don't know if this question was really about, physical illness, injuries, ailments, that kind of stuff, but I think it's really important to think about. And again, I'm sure Shelley is going to tell you that, it's something to call the parent. Is this happening at home? Are they having stomach aches, unable to eat? Is that a new behavior? And every time we see a problematic behavior, we really want to look at, is this a new behavior? When did it start? What may have triggered it? But that's a really good conversation to have, I think, with the parent or guardian at that point.
One of the overall themes in some of the questions was sort of based on poor parental support and disregard for equipment and things like that. Poor Zoom etiquette, not charging their tablets, breaking chargers and headphones, and spilling food and drink. I think maybe sometimes we need to accept that we're not going to get, if we're not getting parental support and you've reached out and you've tried, sometimes there needs to be a level of acceptance there that you're not going to get that parental support. And so the strategy will need to change. And in one respect, that visual chart, that I keep going back to that because it's a really good point. With children, if you have a chart that shows, no breaking headphones or no, or like the plug going into your, the tablet, just showing these things, or these are your expectations on a daily basis, I think would be really helpful. To spell it out in the simplest way for a child, I think you're going to have better support working directly with the child than you may with the parents. If they're refusing and they're not communicating, that behavior may not change.
Yeah, and I just would like to add to that, and it's something we talk about a lot in unconditional childcare. It's one of my favorite suggestions because it takes little time and costs nothing, but specific positive feedback is very, very helpful and can really facilitate change quickly. So just letting a child know what they're doing right, I love that you're at your desk, prepared and ready to go, that your Zoom is charged and that you're ready to attend. I know this is a challenge. You're doing great. It's not going to be forever. Giving them that specific feedback and that idea that this is going to pass will help, I think, in some of those challenges that you're having. And same thing with the parents. Listen, I know this is a really tough time. You've got several kids, you're balancing a job, you're taking care of your children. It's so much to handle. Let's see if we can come up with a strategy or plan to get that electronics device charged at home. What about a visual schedule for home and all the kids know, okay, right after dinner, everybody plugs in their equipment, or maybe they don't have the electricity. Could they charge it in the morning when they came into the center? It's having those conversations and letting everyone know, the parent included, that you want to help them be successful. You want to work together. You want to solve these problems and look for strategies and ideas that will work for you. And then unfortunately, sometimes, as Vicki said, you know, we like to have 100%, but sometimes we're not going to. And then it's a matter of taking a look at what are the other options and who we might be able to get involved. Is that the school? If the child has an IEP, can that be addressed with an accommodation that might help? And looking at outside the box at other areas of problem solving and creative thinking. Now more than ever, we need to really be creative problem solvers, more so than we ever have in the past. I think in order to meet the needs of our children and the families that we're working with. The other thing that we might suggest is a classroom mantra, maybe a positive cheer, a chant that each classroom makes up for their own class. When everybody's feeling down, that they get a chance to shout that out and maybe raise their hands and get excited in order to build up some of that positive energy. So that's another action item that you might be able to implement that may help in the classroom.
Kelly, I love that idea, because that's not only gives them a sense of cohesiveness and collectiveness, we're all in this together, but it also, if you are everywhere going to stand up and we're going to say our cheer and yell, yay, like that's going to allow them to discharge some of that tension and some of that energy that if they hold on to could, you know, manifest itself in problematic ways. So, you know, just to get that burst of energy out, like, and I think Vicki said jumping jacks, like just taking a little break, and then I think doing it together is really valuable, just in terms of, again, we're all doing this together, that always feels good for people.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think it can be a team spirit thing. Maybe the center all has one positive mantra that they do that's kind of like their theme, or maybe each classroom, and there's a little competitiveness between the classes and who has the best mantra and the best maybe moving actions that go with it. But I think the other important part of all of this, and we talked a little bit about collective impact earlier, is the importance of a team. In order for us to get through this very challenging time, we need to all be working together as a team. And I think that we do that at Pinebrook. The United Way does it. Resilient Lehigh Valley does it. We do it together in our community, but we also need to be doing it in our classrooms and with the children, and to be having those conversations of, yes, this is a difficult time, but we're going to get through it together as a team. And how are we going to work together to help each other? So maybe if Aisha is having trouble on her Zoom call, maybe when Jonathan sees her, he can say, hey, Aisha, remember, get back on your call. How can we help each other? How can we help the children to work together as a team in the classroom, and the teachers working together to help everyone be successful?
Kelly, I'm thinking that might be the best takeaway from this yet, is that people feel calmer and more relaxed when they feel that sense of belonging. So when we can create that for the group, and especially when it's belonging kids and adults together, we're all on the same team here. And I think that's huge. And I like that you brought that up. That's great. And I love the mantra and the idea.
Thanks. I really feel that for the teachers as well. I sympathize with the teachers and with the administrators. And to go into a classroom right now and think that you are doing this alone is a very overwhelming and daunting task. And to know that getting the children involved as part of the solution and letting them know that we're all part of a team and we're going to get through it together. And what can we do to do that? I think is also going to help tremendously.
I think that's really great. And we're actually at time. So before I just sort of toss it back to the United Way, I wanted to thank all of you, and we're going to give you some contact information if you would like to reach out and ask any additional questions or anything you're uncomfortable with. So Akshara, let me just kick it back to you and say thanks to everybody.
Thank you so much, Leslie, Shelley, and Vicki. And thank you, participants, for joining us today. I hope that you gained some valuable insight and information, and invite you to join us again in January. Dates and times to follow in the coming weeks. For those who have follow-up questions or concerns about student behavioral needs, please email your questions to officehours@pbfalv.org. And a representative of Pinebrook will respond with some helpful guidance. Thank you again, and wishing you good health and safety in the new year.